Dyan Sellayah, lecturer in metabolism at Reading University. Is welcome, Dyan, by the way.
Thank you.
Why are people in the north fatter than people in the south?
Well, I think that predominantly boils down to socioeconomic factors, and it's certainly the case that um, regions in the north, Lancashire, Manchester region, as well as Yorkshire and the northeast, tend to have the highest rates of social deprivation. So I think socioeconomic factors certainly play a major role. There's also greater unemployment levels in those regions. And education tends to be more of a challenge as well in those regions. So you'll see children who are underperforming in regions in the north of England, unfortunately. As you go further south, you tend to have an increase in socioeconomic factors that actually improve people's way of lives, and that actually is a strong indicator of obesity rates. So what you'll find is that places where there is low socioeconomic prosperity will have high rates of obesity.
But it is a strange syndrome, Dyan, because we're not talking about a message that requires great intellectual genius to understand. The message basically is take a bit of exercise and don't exclusively have a diet of beer and chips. Why is it that message doesn't seem to successfully get through in the north?
And that's a very good point you make, because I think for the most of us, we'd basically be able to say, it simply comes down to eat less, exercise more, and you'll lose weight. And so it does seem like an easy problem to fix. However, it does seem very difficult in certain regions. And I think when you're in a rut and when you're in a status of low employment, you don't see a way up. Social mobility is a problem, so you don't see that one generation can improve on the previous generation, and then it's a sort of a downward spiral, and you find people grow more desperate, and so psychological factors play an important role. And if you've experienced being on the dole or having benefits, it is a difficult thing to get out of. And I'm not an expert in socioeconomic factors. I'm predominantly a metabolic scientist,
of course,
but
yeah.
I'd have to say that socioeconomic factors play a prominent role, and it is hard for many people to understand that it's very difficult to break the cycle.
It's what's interesting. I mean, I go around the country quite a lot, both for work and travelling to watch my football team lose, Fulham. So I go up and down the country quite a lot. And I'm always struck by it. The further north you get, the more the sort of food and drink available on sale seems to be, very fatty,
Fast food,
oily,
yeah.
fried, very unhealthy. I mean, I personally am not complaining about that. I love the food in the north. I love it when you get to Scotland. It gets even more unhealthy. But it's a strange syndrome, isn't it? That as you've progressed north, the diet available in terms of shops, restaurants, cafes, pubs, and all that seems to be that much more unhealthy. Surely we could do something about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a key factor that the government are looking into to try to solve the obesity crisis. And it is definitely the case that the further north you go, the more kebab shops, the more fast food shops there are, and actually that doesn't help. So if you walk out of your street and the first thing you see is a KFC or a kebab shop, then you're obviously more likely to get that sort of food if you're hungry. And studies have shown that places where there is an increased amount of fast food outlets, then people will be fatter. So it could simply be a case of trying to make the high street landscape more healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm personally always a bit uncomfortable about sort of posh, educated people from somewhere like Public Health England sort of lecturing the lower orders on what they ought to eat and what they or how they ought to exercise. But I do understand that it's worth trying to get the health message across, because that causes, or the resultant illnesses causing a lot of problems for the NHS, and it's better to have a healthy nation. But my question, really, final question, Dyan, is we need to recalibrate the way we put this message across, because I think a lot of people, a lot of ordinary people, rebel against the fact that these people from on high are telling them how to eat and how to live. They don't want to be lectured like that. We need to kind of change the way we get this message across and stop sounding quite so authoritarian, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And you hear a lot of talk about the sugar tax and the fat tax, and just taxing everything, and then taking off the adverts for fast food on the TV and things like that, which and then coupled with the preaching from the establishment as well. I don't think that necessarily makes for positive change. And actually, the government's initiative to tackle obesity has been shown to be somewhat faltering, and so potentially, as you say, people are not getting the message, or the message is not being conveyed efficiently. And I think the change has to come from a fundamental level, from within, and I think society as a whole needs to bear the brunt of various initiatives to tackle this. And I think you really got to start with children, because if you look at the stats, if you look at the stats, I think childhood obesity is a major problem. Something like 10 to 15, potentially even 20% of 4 or 5 year olds, believe it or not, are overweight. And what we know is that if you're overweight by puberty, you're much more likely to be overweight through your adulthood, and then it's a very difficult cycle to break. So I think the key thing is to try and get children to be more healthy, try to get their diets to improve. Things are slowly changing, but probably not fast enough. And as we've seen with the COVID crisis, I think 70% of people who are hospitalized with severe COVID have been obese. And so I think this really is kicking the teeth for some of the challenges that the government have tried to resist over the recent years, but it's probably not changing fast enough.
Yeah, I think in the end, Dyan, somehow or other we have to make fish, chips, mushy peas and a pint of lager are much less attractive to eat, because it is nice. But listen, so that's just a joke. You're quite right. So, serious, thank you so much for your time, Dyan. That's Dr. Dyan Sellayah. He's a lecturer in metabolism.